iTalk Audio is proudly sponsored by Hogstrite USA. Hogstrite is an industry leader in surgical microscopes. A brilliant fusing of Swiss optics, German engineering, and years of experience allow them to produce surgical microscopes, slit lamps, and ophthalmic diagnostics that exceed ophthalmic surgery needs and set future standards for optics, engineering, ergonomics, and imaging. Learn how you can work more efficiently and effectively with Hogstrite at hsmicroscopes.com.
Hello and welcome to another episode of iTalk Audio. I am super excited today to be talking with a gentleman that I had not heard of or known before. A quick introduction by my friend Dr. Ambati, and then started to dive in and figured this man is incredible. The work that he's doing both around the world and at home, his hobbies that he has, just everything about this person is just absolutely amazing. So I am incredibly excited to talk to and welcome to iTalk Audio, Dr. Geoff Tabin. Hello, sir.
Hi, thank you very much for having me, Daryl.
Absolutely. It's my absolute pleasure. So normally, like I kind of mentioned before we were talking, I have people kind of do an introduction, but I think part of the joy of getting to know you a little bit is to kind of weave our way through the story of where you've come to be where you are currently. So the first thing I want to mention, obviously, is that you are part of a foundation, and I'd like you to tell the story of how that foundation came to be, but in just a second. The foundation is the Himalayan Cataract Project, and looking at some of the research for what you've done, I was astounded by some of the facts that you put out there. You've done over 800,000 surgeries since 1995. And you partnered with another amazing man that I wish I knew even more about. And I'm super excited to have you kind of tell me how you discovered and met this person. But you partnered for this project with Dr. Sanduk Ruit, if I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Perfect. Yep.
How did you guys first come to meet? In your TED Talk, you have a wonderful TED Talk. You kind of you give a little bit of the background of how you came to know him. But dive into that for me a little bit, because he just sounds like such an amazing person.
Well, he really is. And he's sort of the elder brother and genius behind everything we've accomplished. I'm sort of more the fat boy who plays because I bring the ball. And I've been just so fortunate to have amazing mentors and a bit of serendipity in my life. I had a very fortuitous course through medicine. I was a very keen rock climber as a kid, and I became a fairly fanatical climber, rock and ice and big walls during medical school. I'm sorry, during my backtrack a little bit. I became a very fanatical rock, ice, and big wall climber during my undergraduate days.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought actually I already knew by the time I went to, my teenage years, I kind of really wanted to be a doctor. I was fascinated by physiology, the human body. I thought it was a field where you can do something to help people. And if you're privileged enough to, win the sperm lottery and be born in America, the advantages we have, I wanted to give something back. And I saw medicine as the place I wanted to do it. And my fantasy as a teenager was to be an orthopedic surgeon. I had a couple of charismatic sports medicine people who I encountered early in life. As I was participating in sports and climbing, I learned a lot about traumatic injuries to friends and other people. And I really thought I was going to go into orthopedics. And then I was given a scholarship to go to Oxford University for 2 years in England after college. And it was all expenses for 2 years. I did a master's degree in philosophy, but more importantly, Oxford had an 8-week term followed by a 6-week break, then an 8-week term, then another 6-week break, then an 8-week term, and then a 3-month long vacation. So I more or less had 28 weeks of paid climbing time based in Europe to start with.
So you're getting an education and also indulging one of your biggest passions. That's fantastic.
And it also turned out that Oxford had a system of these indigenous trust funds that were remnants of the days when Oxford students were supposed to civilize various aspects of the world. And one in particular was called the A.C. Irvine Grant for Oxford students to enjoy strenuous holiday in mountains abroad. And that was endowed in memory of Andy Irvine, who disappeared with George Lee Mallory on Everest in 1924.
Okay.
And it turned out that the more exotic of a locale we chose, the more cash money they gave us.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so my partner and I began going to these remote big walls in Asia and in Africa, and we weren't necessarily the best 21-year-old climbers at the time, but we were the only ones with Yosemite, El Capitan experience who were 21, who were getting funded to go to the remote big walls around the world. And it really changed my life in two ways. One, it really opened my eyes to adventure and going to places where we really didn't know the outcome. Even then, when I would go to, say, climb El Capitan when I was 19, I knew roughly what the difficulty was. There's a guidebook. It told you what route you were following and how hard it should be. And all of a sudden, we were going to the unknown. And I started opening my mind to real adventure and taking on tasks with an uncertain outcome, which has really been a very big thing in terms of having patience and stick-to-itness
Sure.
for what we've been doing in ophthalmology. But it also allowed me to see firsthand the disparity in healthcare between the haves and the have-nots.
Right.
And I read philosophy, but I looked at the moral underpinnings of healthcare and healthcare delivery and the differences in both quality and access for healthcare in the poorest countries of the world versus the Western world. And so by the time I matriculated at Harvard Medical School, I already knew I wanted to do something in global medicine. The other thing that happened was the way you make a name for yourself in medicine is by coming up with a procedure no one's ever done or some sort of invention. And in climbing, it's going somewhere and climbing something no one's ever climbed. And again, my partner and I got really lucky with the weather conditions, and we got up a couple of pretty, I'd say interesting kind of new climbs and remote areas. And I was asked to give a couple of lectures about some of our climbs, and really fortunate to meet a couple of my climbing heroes. And out of nowhere, in the middle of my first year of medical school, I got asked to join an American team that was going to make the first exploration of the last unclimbed face on Everest. And Everest is a three-sided pyramid.
Yep.
And the largest and steepest side of Everest, which nobody hears about, is the east side of Everest. And I was an amazing all-star American team, and I was the youngest person on the climb. And we had no native support in the mountain whatsoever. And in 1983, we made the first ascent of the east side of Mount Everest. Our route has still never been repeated.
Yeah, I was going to say that. From the research, it looks like you folks were the only ones ever to do that.
Well, there've been two other successful ascents from the whole eastern side.
Okay.
And the route we did, which is the hardest, was the first route on the eastern side. That's been never repeated. And that sort of opened up a lot of doors for me in the climbing realm. And being, a young kid in medical school, I got involved in high altitude research. The Harrison's Internal Medicine textbook, I'm still the author of the high altitude medicine chapter.
Nice.
And I was, again, continuing to get onto some amazing trips to climb in more remote parts of the world. I did manage to go back and finish. I graduated from Harvard Medical School in 1985. I did an internship, and I was still thinking a little bit in terms of orthopedics and perhaps doing something with crippled children. And I started actually a residency in orthopedic surgery, but I didn't really see how that would relate back to the developing world. And I was kind of trying to figure out what my role might be. And I got the opportunity to go back to Everest, this time on the Nepal side, as the team doctor for the team that got the first American woman to the top of Mount Everest. It was one of the last of the sort of big sponsored expeditions, and still in the days before the guided trips. And we had sort of great conditions. I was the token boy who got to the top with the first two American women.
Nice job.
And I had a lot of other opportunities come my way. I went on to become the fourth person to climb to the high point on all 7 continents. And in that period, I was back in Nepal and working a bit as a general doctor, trying to figure out what I was going to do in global health. And I had actually just decided to apply at public health school. And I thought the best thing an individual doctor could do. I was really, frustrated with all the people who were sick from bad water, poor food, just poor basic health conditions. I was going to try and do a PhD in public health and approach global health care from that route. When I saw a Dutch team doing a cataract outreach in Nepal, and in the village where I was working, it was just accepted. You get old, your hair turns white, your eye turns white, and then you die.
Right.
And people just got depressed and were waiting to die. And in our little village, there were 12 people who had bilateral white cataracts, were depressed, in the corner, shriveled, waiting to die. And this Dutch team came in and had surgery. It was the craziest miracle, Daryl. It was something I'd never experienced in my time in medical school in America. People just absolutely being reborn.
Mm-hmm.
The day after the patch came off, the people saw well. And the joy and the excitement and the joy of the family and the way it changed lives. This was in 1989. I was watching a Dutch ophthalmologist named Jan Kok. And I went back to Kathmandu all excited about ophthalmology. And I saw that there was no one in Nepal in 1989 doing modern cataract surgery with lens implants. I thought, wow, this is a place I could make a difference. I had already developed a fondness, and this was, my 4th time climbing in Nepal, and I already developed a fondness for the country and for the people. I thought this is perfect. I came back to the States, and I fell right into an ophthalmology residency. There was a position that had opened up out of the mats at Brown University. They needed someone who would start at PGY2. And basically, I decided I wanted to do an ophthalmology in April, came back to the States in May, and that July 1st, I started my ophthalmology residency.
And it was...
Now, what I didn't know... Go ahead.
No, I was just going to kind of cut to the chase a little. It was during your time in Nepal that you actually ended up meeting up and witnessing Dr. Ruit. Is that correct?
No, I witnessed Jan Kok, who was a Dutch ophthalmologist.
Right.
And what I didn't know is that Dr. Ruit was already finishing the last year of his very extensive training in Australia when I was looking in Kathmandu and seeing no one was doing anything in modern eye care or modern cataract surgery in Nepal.
Okay.
So I went back to start my residency. Now, just to backtrack, Sanduk Ruit was born in a little hill village that had no running water, no electricity, no roads. He was a 4-day walk from the nearest road and no schools. And his father was a herder of yaks who traded salt. He would take salt from Nepal over the pass, work goods from Nepal, go over a pass into Tibet and trade work goods from Nepal for salt, and then he would take salt over the passes back into Nepal. And when Sanduk was about 8, he was involved in a very bad fire. They just cooked at home over an open wood fire. And his father carried him for 2 days to a monastery where the monks said prayers and put little, native healing balms on him. And while he was recuperating, the reincarnated Lama of the monastery said, wow, this is an amazing boy. You have to get him an education. So at the age of 9, his father walked him for 11 days to Darjeeling, India. He spoke not a word of Hindi, not a word of English, and his father left him at an English medium Jesuit school in Darjeeling, India. And he emerged from that to score highly enough on his Indian exams to win a full scholarship to one of the best medical schools in India. He then scored number 1 in the nation of India on his medical exams when he graduated, and went to the All India Institute of Medical Sciences in Delhi for his ophthalmology residency. And then he came back to Nepal, and he did a 1-year fellowship at the Aravind Eye Hospital system, seeing high-volume surgery there. He came back to Nepal, and he was recognized by Dr. Koch, the same doctor I watched, who brought him to the Netherlands to retrain as a microsurgeon. And then he was noticed by Fred Hollows, an Australian ophthalmologist, who brought him to Sydney, where he did 2 additional years of training. And one of the big obstacles at that time for doing lens surgery in the developing world was the cost of the lens. In 1989, the least expensive intraocular lens on the global market was over $200, which made it absolutely prohibitive in the developing world. And he and Fred Hollows came up with the idea of starting an intraocular lens factory in Kathmandu. And he finished all of his training, came back, and started his program in 1990, which was I was a first-year resident in 1990 when he returned to Nepal. And he developed a system where no one does anything that anyone with lesser skills can do, and began figuring out how can we do the same quality surgery, what we're doing with our state-of-the-art phacoemulsification in America and in Australia and the Netherlands. How can we deliver that surgery at a cost that's affordable to Nepal? And through Australian charities, he raised the money to start the first low-cost, high-quality intraocular lens factory in the world, the Fred Hollows IOL factory in Kathmandu. And as I said, developed this incredible delivery model where he just really was able to think out of the box and say, how can we do this the best? And not worry about any medical, legal, or HIPAA, and develop a sort of an assembly line system for really great quality, high-volume cataract.
Right.
And my final year of fellowship, after I finished my residency, as I was finishing my residency, I was looking around for how can I get involved in global ophthalmology? What do I do? I knew I wanted to do it. I wanted to come back to Nepal, but how do you connect those dots to actually do it? And the one person in global ophthalmology at the time who was advocating we need to teach local people to do the work and really seemed to have a real sense of how things should be done was Fred Hollows. And I heard Professor Hollows lecture a couple of times. I began corresponding with him. And so when I finished my residency, I applied to do my fellowship under the auspices of Professor Hollows. Unfortunately, he developed a very aggressive renal carcinoma. So I ended up coming over to work with Hugh Taylor, who's a cornea specialist. He was the chairman in Melbourne at Royal Victorian Eye and Ear Hospital, one of Fred Hollows' main partners and proteges, and the world's expert on both onchocerciasis, river blindness, and trachoma. And so I came to work with Professor Taylor, who's been an incredible mentor for me. And during that year, in the last couple of months of my fellowship in Australia, he sent me over to Nepal to work with Dr. Ruit, who by that time was already 3 years into developing his program.
You tell a great story in your TED Talk about one of the first times that you were doing surgery with him. It was something like 220 people that you were doing, and he did by far the vast majority of those. And
we did. The first outreach I did with him in 3 days, it was incredible. It was my first hands-on experience with it was, we did 224 cataract surgeries in 3 days, all on bilaterally blind people. And just the joy was just so crazy, infectious. But when you get the breakdown, Dr. Ruit did 201 while I did 23.
That's just amazing.
And for me, I hadn't really been experiencing, these hyper mature and mature, white and black cataracts. And also, I wasn't used to operating with, an $8,000 microscope. I was used to an American quality microscope.
Right.
The instruments were different, but the thing that was amazing was the results, particularly in his cases, were as good as the best hospitals have done.
Right.
I went, wow, this is amazing. I want to join you and be part of what you're doing. So when I finished my fellowship there, I moved to Nepal to work with Dr. Ruit full time, and began teaching his system, learning, basically how to do cataract surgery in that sort of environment, but also teaching his system and helping, develop a system where no one does anything that anyone with lesser skills can do. We don't have trained nurses putting in eye drops.
Right.
We don't have trained technicians moving patients from one place to the next. And Dr. Ruit had the genius to, at the same time as we started taking some of our best young cataract surgeons and sending them abroad to Australia, mainly for subspecialty training in retina, glaucoma, pediatric ophthalmology. He also started a 3-year program with Kathmandu University to train ophthalmic assistants, a 1-year program after nursing school to train ophthalmic nurses, a 6-month program after 8th grade to train ophthalmic technicians, and really developing the whole component of the care delivery system. And then once we had the full component of full subspecialists, full world-class residency in Kathmandu.
And that's one of the things that I really enjoyed about kind of learning about the work that you folks are doing is it's not you're just out there training, surgeons in the area to be able to perform similar types of surgery at the same level that you can provide here in the States. Instead, you're doing that in addition to teaching all of the support staff that's necessary to give that. To have that surgery be done properly. You have technicians that know fully what they're doing. You have nurses that can completely support and do their jobs to the best of their ability as well. That's an aspect that I think a lot of, well, I don't want to generalize, but I think some of the other outreach programs, they focus merely on one aspect, like just the surgery. Let's teach people how to do this surgery, rather than look at it as the comprehensive whole that both you and Dr. Ruit do, which I think is just fascinating.
Yeah, and the other thing that Dr. I read grandly, but again, Dr. Ruit is kind of a genius. One of the other things that he really developed was a wonderful system that's been termed compassionate capitalism. And he felt that every patient deserves the absolute best care. At that time, the Aravan Eye Hospital systems had a paying section and a non-paying section. And the non-paying section got aphakic surgery and aphakic glasses, and the rich were helping support things with paying for their surgery with an IOL. Well, really felt that we need to give the absolute best care to everyone. But he came in as the only Western-level doctor for the country. And prior to him, anyone with any means would go to Delhi for their cataract surgery, or if they had money, they'd go to London or to America. As soon as he came back to Nepal, the elite all wanted to have Dr. Ruit do their surgery. What he did was he established a system of very, very, very high volume surgery, where a single surgeon will do between 50 and 100 surgeries in a day. And having about 20 or 25% of those being full paying patients, about 25% being subsidized patients who would pay something but not full, and then 50% of the patients having free care.
That was one of the questions that I was going to, as you mentioned, I just figured I'd jump in. I apologize. One of the difficulties in having foundations and doing mission work, obviously, is the money that's necessary to keep that work alive. And so that model is I don't think it's necessarily a unique model, but that model seems to be one that works very well to help sustain and keep that work alive. Is that correct?
Right. Well, the thing that's happened is, as we've been doing it, we've been having our we have he's created a system where everyone, the more volume we do and the higher the quality, the more everyone makes. We pay our
Sure.
nurses a good salary, our technicians a good salary, the people who sweep the floors a good salary, and the doctors get a very good salary on a Nepal basis. They're also doing a very high volume of surgery. Even America, I think the average ophthalmologist does somewhere around 200 to 300 cataracts a year.
Right.
In India, it's probably 400 to 500 a year. In Nepal, doctors in our programs do between 1,500 and 3,000 a year.
That's just amazing.
And so they become really good surgeons.
Right.
And then the whole thing lifts upwards. And so creating that whole system, when we started in 1994, all of Nepal, they were doing only 15,000 cataract surgeries a year. And only about 3,000 of those were with IOLs, and those were all being done by Dr. Ruit. Now, Nepali surgeons are doing over 350,000 cataracts a year. The quality is absolutely superb. And Nepal has more or less got a really good handle on the backlog, and the rate of blindness has gone down from about 0.86% of the population to 0.23% of the population.
That's absolutely brilliant.
Large, poor country that's really reversed its rate of blindness.
So Nepal was the first place that you really kind of partnered up and started this mission work with your foundation. And if I'm understanding it correctly, you have now spread to multiple countries into Africa, and in each of these places you have started to establish these centers.
Right. We're working on the same model. We started in Nepal. Within a couple of years, the government of Bhutan asked us to come work in Bhutan. And we started the first eye care in the nation of Bhutan. We began taking one Bhutanese doctor into our residency program in Kathmandu a year for 8 years. We provided subspecialty training for all of them. And now Bhutan has its own residency. We moved into Tibet, training Tibetan doctors to do cataract surgery. We moved into northern India and spread quite a bit throughout Asia. Now, meanwhile, as we started to spread into some of these other countries, I got asked by the health minister if you also teach American doctors, and I really haven't done anything except work in Nepal. And I also was not getting funding. I was living extremely well, but I was not getting additional funds that would help purchase necessary equipment. I didn't have any relations with any of the industry and, equipment manufacturers or pharmaceuticals. So Dr. Ruit and I decided it would be best if I went back to the States for a while and took an academic job. And so the only place advertising at the time for an academic cornea position was the University of Vermont. So I came back as an assistant professor at the University of Vermont. I stayed there, ended up starting a family in Vermont, and ended up spending about 3 months of the year working in Nepal and contiguous countries, and then 9 months of the working as an ophthalmologist and teaching at the University of Vermont Medical School. I went through the tenure process, got promoted to associate professor with tenure at the University of Vermont, and there became an issue with the amount of time I was spending in Nepal and having a little bit of difficulty getting away as much as I'd like. And Professor Randy Olson at the University of Utah Moran Eye Center recruited me, and he and Alan Crandall brought me to the Moran Eye Center at the University of Utah to start the first academic division of global medicine or global ophthalmology in the country. And I was a cornea cataract specialist at Utah, but they gave me quite a bit more freedom to spend time working overseas. And what's more, Alan Crandall, who's a wonderful man, a great glaucoma specialist, had already been working a couple of times a year on mission trips just doing cataract surgery in Ghana. And I went with him. I saw the incredible need in Africa, and began thinking about how can we bring the same system that we were using to develop eye care in Asia into Africa, of training at all levels. And I was starting in Ghana, and then I began working with the UN Millennium Development Villages Project and an economist named Geoffrey Sachs, looking at the economic impact of blindness in Africa and how much of an impediment to social development and economic prosperity blindness is for the individual, but also the family and the communities in Africa. And we worked at the UN Millennium Development Villages, and then from there began expanding into other countries in Africa. We expanded into Rwanda, we expanded into Ethiopia, and now our largest programs are Ethiopia and Ghana. And we're hoping that the same system of getting some real quality, we really look for great future leaders and really sort of exciting, great young doctors to mentor. And we have a couple of just fantastic partners in both Ghana and Ethiopia and in Rwanda. And we're hoping by establishing really quality programs that will again spread to adjacent countries. And Dr. Ruit has become the sort of main person watching over and controlling our Asian programs. And my main focus the last about 10 years has been in Africa. And about 3 years ago, I got recruited away from the University of Utah to an endowed chair at Stanford University for local medicine. We started the first global ophthalmology fellowship now 12 years ago at the University of Utah. And that's now expanded from Utah into there are now 7 academic programs with global ophthalmology fellowships. We have a fantastic global ophthalmology fellowship now at Stanford.
That is absolutely fascinating. And one of the things you touched on, believe it or not, you've answered most of my questions already. But one of the things that you touched on, which I think a lot of young and upcoming ophthalmologists or just doctors in general, they really do have a desire to reach out and try to help. But that balance between making a living, being whatever it is they are, ophthalmologist, orthopedic surgeon, what have you, and then trying to actually carve out time to do work either elsewhere or in their community becomes a real balancing act that a lot of people have to do. Any advice that you could give for people that want to do this but are just having trouble finding the time to be able to do it?
Well, I think one thing is priorities, and what you're thinking of, because my economic outlook, I didn't come from a wealthy family, and money was not a priority. My parents were both university professors, and as I sort of was going through my formative years, my heroes were the Yosemite climbing bums who were living in the dirt, scarfing food off the leftovers of tourists at the cafeteria in Yosemite. And so a lot of my friends were living at a level that would be get a little bit below the poverty line. So I never really, I thought I was living amazingly in Nepal with really no income to go do any extra things, but I had great food. I had my own cook. I had someone who, cleaned. I lived in a relatively nice place, and I loved my work. And I think having that passion for the work, and at every step in my negotiations when I went to the University of Vermont, when I went to the University of Utah, I would prioritize time off rather than money.
Right.
And what I was doing, how much time I would be able to spend doing what I wanted to do. And to me, making $120,000 a year was more than plenty because my needs were simple. I'm still, driving the same,
Right.
15-year-old Subaru. But at every stage, it's been, I've been passionate about what I've been doing, and things have really sort of worked out nicely. My move to Utah afforded me more time, and now my move to Stanford I have more or less unlimited time to work developing global eye care, and Stanford pays me a reasonable salary um, to focus my energies, but on global eye care development. But it's really been at every stage my prioritizing what I'm doing for the work and the quality of my life and the amount of time I have to do what I really feel I need to do over the money.
And I think that is brilliant. And I am so grateful that there are people out there like yourself who do prioritize their passions over an income. Surgeons do make a decent living, and some would say a very well-to-do living. But when you prioritize the work and trying to advance, in your case, you folks are trying to reduce that 40 million, I think you said, around the world that are blind, that most can be prevented rather easily. When you prioritize that work, that's when you do affect change in the world. And I personally can't thank you enough for doing that and prioritizing the passion to make that change over simply earning a paycheck. I think that's brilliant.
Well, for me, it's such a privilege. Watching young doctors in Africa blossom. So still, it's such a thrill. We're now at the point where in some of our high volume outreaches in Ethiopia, we're sight to 1,500 blind people in a week, and it's just crazy. 300 people a day
Right.
going from blind to seeing well.
That's a common theme on this podcast when we talk to people who are doing this kind of work out there. The over and over, just seeing the joy in people's faces when those bandages are first taken off and they're seeing the world for the first time, either ever or in decades. Just that joy that you can give to somebody was something that to us may seem very simple, but for them is absolutely everything.
And the other thing, the amount that it costs. It's so incredible to me that the world isn't taking this on. So it's such a fraction of our U.S. military budget. We could restore sight to every blind person in the world.
I think you said in your TED Talk that
Jeff Bezos or Mark Zuckerberg, Melissa Chan, they could easily eradicate all needless blindness.
Sure.
We know how to do it. We just lack a little bit of the resources in our government.
So, believe it or not, we're getting very, very close to the end here. So, as we kind of start to wrap up, and you have been amazing, you answered every question that I had without, in most cases, without my actually having to ask, which was awesome. Obviously, I would like you to take a quick moment
I might point out that you did ask me the questions to cover in an email already.
Right. I did give you a heads up. Sure.
Your questions.
Yeah. So I want to give you the platform real quick so you can do a shout out for your organization, mention the website, anything else that you personally want to mention for people.
Yeah, we've been very fortunate that, when we called the Human Project, unfortunately at the beginning, because when I started with Dr. Ruit, Paul was doing 15,000 cataracts a year, with 60,000 new people going blind from cataracts, and a backlog of more than 250,000. Tibet had this huge backlog and no one doing surgery. Bhutan, a huge backlog, no one doing surgery. So we thought it'd be a lifetime to get our handle on just those couple of countries for the cataract project. But it's quickly morphed into an overall eye care development program. And then now a lot of resources are going to Africa. But fortunately, we chose the URL of www.cureblindness.org. So it's sort of slowly morphing into Himalayan Satellite Project /cureblindness. And our website is www.cureblindness.org.
And I encourage everybody listening to go and check it out. The content on your website is very descriptive. It describes exactly what the work is that you're doing with the progress that you've made, and it's incredibly inspiring. So I encourage everybody to go check it out.
And if ophthalmologists are listening to this, we're looking for ophthalmologists who want to go and spend time teaching in Indonesia. We're looking for young, passionate American ophthalmologists to get involved. I encourage you to consider either a global fellowship in Stanford or at Utah or a couple of the other excellent programs at Emory and Wills.
And we'll make sure to link to all of that. We'll put links into when we post this podcast. We'll put links in there so people can either reach out to you directly or through through the website or various avenues that if they want to try to find a way that they can help support or even become trained to then help. We'll put all those links, of course, in the description. So,
okay, and I'm easily reachable at Stanford Medical School. My emails are either Tabin@cureblindness.org or just my last name, Tabin at Stanford.
Excellent. Dr. Tabin, it has been an absolute pleasure talking with you today. I really appreciate your carving out the time. I appreciate you and the work that you were doing around the world. Thank you ever so kindly, and thank you very much for coming on the podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks, Joe. It's been an honor talking to you. I look forward to meeting you in person sometime.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you all very much, and until next time.
iTalk Audio is sponsored by Curious Conversations Marketing. Curious Conversations Marketing believes in the power of story. They help businesses just like yours tell their story in their way with their words. Curious Conversations uses the digital world to tell the story of your business. From the people to the product, let Curious Conversations assist you in telling the story of your business. Focused in the digital realm, from social media, reviews, and reputation management, an overall online presence, to creating, recording, and hosting podcasts just like this one. Learn more at CuriousConversationsMarketing.com.